Morning. Morning Lorraine, Stuart. Morning Stephen. Morning Grace. Barbara. Hey, that moved a bit fast. Hi Nancy. Stuart. Ray. Alistair. Stuart again. Rosemary. Margaret. Sandra. Maureen. Robert. Alex. Morning Kirsty. Morning Neil. Morning Fiona. Morning Tommy. Good morning Robert. Good morning Mr Mulligan. Morning BJ. Morning Ian. Hi Mandy. Morning Elizabeth. How's Duisburg? Ewan. Karen. How we doing? William. Neil. Morning Derek. Malcolm. Morag. Morning Ellie. Lynn. Morning Wilma. Karen. Morning Duncan. Caroline. Morning Jane. Good morning Alistair, you're number 100 today, so let's get this broadcast underway. It's Indytruck Davy out the truck and in his office at home in Salisbury, where it is a wonderful morning, 13 degrees, good day to get the washing out. That is the weather forecast for Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. You want to know the weather's like what you are? Look out your own bloody windy. Alright, let's get this broadcast underway. I'm afraid the latest COVID figures on Thursday are not available due to technical problems at Public Health Scotland. Okay, so let's move on. Moving on, Thursday started with two themes in the rags. The Queen's birthday spoiled by Prince Harry and a vote in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers on referring Bojo the Clown, the criminal PM, to the Privilege Committee for judgment on whether he broke the ministerial code and misled Parliament. Alright, but we'll get more on that as we get into the report, as you can imagine. Alright, on Prince Harry ruining the Queen's birthday, I doubt it, but hey, the right-wing warags need something to keep them away from the trouble of their god, or demigod, Bojo the criminal PM. Alright, now, as to the Commons debate and on referring Bojo to the Privilege Committee, originally Bojo had planned on whipping his MPs against referring him to the Privilege Committee, but it would appear there was a wee rebellion overnight and there was a change of heart. Alright, so the Tory MPs were given a free vote, meaning they get to vote with what little conscience they had or have. But as I say, we'll get more of that as we get into the report. Alright, moving on, Thursday, and the criminal PM is on his way to India to boost trade, apparently. No, more like hide out the road of Partygate. Right, on the flight out, Bojo tells reporters that are travelling with the trade delegation that he intends to fight the next general election in 2024 as Prime Minister. It's also reported that Bojo can see no circumstances under which he would resign. So it would appear if Bojo is going to go, it's going to require Tory MPs to eject him. But as I say, we'll get even more out further down as we go as well. Right, moving on, back here in Scotland, the mainstream media are reporting on ex-SNP MP Natalie McGarry's fraud case. Miss McGarry is accused of embezzling £25,000 from two pro-independence groups, alright? Now, Miss McGarry, Miss McGarry is accused of embezzling £21,000 from the campaign group Women for Independence and embezzling £4,661 from the Glasgow SNP Association. Okay. The funds went missing from Women for Independence between the 26th of April 2023 and the 30th of November 2015. The funds from the Glasgow SNP Association went missing between the 9th of April 2014 and the 10th of August 2015. Miss McGarry has pleaded not guilty to both charges. Right, forensic accountants presented the court with a forensic breakdown of Women for Independence accounts, and they seem to show that Miss McGarry was paying her rent with PayPal credits from the Women for Independence account, alright. The breakdown of Miss McGarry's personal finances also showed that between April 2014 till she became an MP in 2015, Miss McGarry didn't have a regular income. So there's been a forensic breakdown on the Women for Independence's accounts, and it would appear that Miss McGarry, according to these forensic experts, was paying her rent from PayPal credits from Women for Independence. But as I say, the trial's got a wee bit to go and it will continue. So we'll get to when we get to the outcome, I'll go a wee bit more into it. Alright, moving on. Thursday, it's been reported that the 52 Dnipro kids brought to Scotland by the charity of the same name have left Callander and are now settled into more permanent residences in Edinburgh. The children are between 1 and 19 years of age and arrived in Scotland 4 weeks ago now. Edinburgh City Council Social Work Department says the children are settling in, and the main focus now is to get life back to some form of normality, or as normal as possible for them. The older children will be starting their education, and it will be online education provided by the Ukrainian Department for Education for Displaced Kids. So the Ukrainian Department of Education is actually making the curriculum available online so that kids that have had to flee to Poland, Romania, Hungary and right across Europe, including here in Scotland, will have resources to continue their education. Right. The older children will also commence learning English to help them integrate into Scottish society for as long as they need to be with us. Right. Now, obviously we wish the kids well and that they haven't suffered too much trauma and that they can settle. The great thing about the kids that came from Dunedin was they came from an orphanage together, and they have what's called a house mother who stays with them and brings them up. So that house mother is with her. The house mothers came with them, so the kids have familiar parents, a familiar parent to help them as they settle here for as long as they need to be with us. And as I say, we wish them luck and settling in and hope they haven't suffered too much trauma. Okay, right, moving on. Thursday, and First Minister's the First Minister. Hold on a wee second. First Minister promises a pandemic level response to the cost of living crisis and a prelude to the party's manifesto launch for the local elections on Friday. And the manifesto will be a commitment to insulating homes to reduce the cost of energy bills. There will be a reduction scheme, a council tax reduction scheme, protections put in place, because as you know, when you have zero income, then you can go and get your council tax discounted. You know, if there's one of you's working and it's not up to much, you can go and get your council tax discounted. The SNP will invest in expanding and keeping these schemes going. Alright. A new parental transition fund, they're calling it, will be put in place to help parents transition into the workforce as their kids hit 5 and 6 and 7. They've got a legal obligation to try and find work of their own benefits. Alright. And there'll be more walking and cycle routes, back with initiatives to get people out their cars and walking and cycling more. And a plan to cut car journeys by 20% in 2030. Okay, there'll be more details to come on Friday. But the mitigations that they're talking about for the cost of living crisis is going to be quite minimal. Our budget's being controlled from out with Scotland, so you know, and there's a squeeze on. The Scottish budget will reduce. The surpluses have got the news because of COVID. Right. Moving on, Thursday, Scotland and the Auditor General Stephen Boyle tells the committee at Holyrood that a full review into the construction of 2 ferries at Fergus Marine is required. Mr Boyle said the earlier report stating that Ferguson shouldn't have been awarded the contract. So he reiterates that to the panel. But I mean, the SNP government said saving the yards and saving 300 skilled jobs in Inverquoid was more important than the cost at the time. Although we have to say that the awarding of the contract was between the Minister for Transport at the time. I think the Deputy First Minister and Keith Brown were also involved. Because I think Keith Brown was the Justice Secretary at the time, and Swanee was the Finance Secretary at the time. And it was between Seamill and Ferguson Marine. Alright, now the contract was agreed at 97 million quid. Ferguson Marine failed to deliver on the contract, meaning the Scottish Government had to step in. It's now cost 2.5 times what it should have cost to deliver these two boats, and they're still a year away from being floating tubs. But saving the jobs in Inverquoid for me was more important than what the overall cost is going to be, because once these two tubs are created and in the water, then they can get back to doing what they do best with their skills, and that is to build boats with conventional engines instead of dual fuel systems and get them out into the fleet for Calmac a lot quicker. Alright, but as I say, the Auditor General says there should be a further inquiry. Alright, now moving on. Thursday, and First Minister's is back. First up is Dross, and he went on road tolls and congestion charges. Dross says councils should not be looking at these things during the cost of living crisis. The First Minister tells the half-wit, a hypocrite, that the councils have a legal requirement on them, placed upon them by the complete Scottish Parliament, which passed the laws on achieving net zero, or the targets on net zero, so they have a legal requirement to cut congestion in the cities. And Dross is particularly on about Glasgow and Edinburgh, where they're talking about a London-style congestion charge. And of course, as we know, there's a the workplace parking charge levy, which is also available to councils if they want to use it. Alright, so they're talking about, congestion charges in Glasgow and Edinburgh to cut down pollution and meet their targets, which have been placed on them as a legal requirement by the Scottish Parliament. Anyway, the First Minister tells Dross to grow the bloody hell up. You wanted powers devolved from here to the councils, and now you don't want the councils to bloody well use them. Now, but there's a Davy says with this one. There's absolute hypocrisy in what Dross has got to say here, because Dross is an MP and a member of the Westminster Parliamentary Tory Party, and in Westminster they still have, and in England, they have road tolls, they have tunnel tolls, they have bridge tolls, they have congestion charges in their cities, and one of their cities, Nottingham, even is a workplace parking levy. So Dross is a total hypocrite, screaming, give more powers to the council, give more powers to the council, and then say, hey, because the Tories have created a cost of living crisis here, can't allow the councils to use these powers, Scottish Government step in. Wow. Yes, the First Minister tells him, listen, this is a Tory cost of living crisis, you bampot. You know, Dross, absolute hypocrisy. Anyway, next up was Poverty Pie Sarwar, and he went on waste from the public purse over the 15 years the SNP have been in government. Now, Sarwar says over 15 years the SNP have presided over 3 billion waste in public spending. Now, Sarwar said that over 15 years, errors have cost the Scottish public purse, £1,200 per head. So that would be 80 quid a year, over 15 years. Now, if Poverty Pie had just paid his bloody his workers a living wage, then they wouldn't have missed the bloody £80, but we'll get to that bit in a minute. I mean, there's here hypocrisy in what Dross was saying and all, even though his figures were wrong. The First Minister gave him a breakdown of some of the figures that he was talking about, which were already pre-allocated for work in creating hospitals, and the funds by the Crown Office has got nothing to do with the Scottish Government either. But that's not the point. The point is, the First Minister tells Sarwar, you know, you're wrong. Anyway, Sarwar says that money, that 3 billion, could have helped in the cost of living crisis. There's a couple of things there. Sarwar was on that Parliament line as bloody he'd have, because the Scottish Government have got to have a balanced budget at the end of each year. So they couldn't have squirreled away 3 billion quid. But what's more important, what makes him a real hypocrite is his imperial masters in Westminster have just pissed up against the law 140 odd billion quid for the public purse on dodgy, crooked carry-ons over COVID. Let me break that down for you. 4 billion's already been written off after the COVID loan scheme, right? Lord Agnew, he quits as the corruption minister because he says another 137 billion quid of the Tory loans to businesses which didn't have due diligence done on them is going to have to be written off. And then with the 12.75 billion carry on when it comes to PPE. All out in fast lanes to their pals, dodgy contracts. 10 billion of it now has to be incinerated because A, it was out of date, and B, it wasn't suitable for use. So here we have a cuckoo in the nest, standing in the Scottish Parliament, talking about a wastage of £8 per head, £80 per head per year over 15 years. That's bugger all. Nothing. And yet his imperial masters are spiffing billions of it up against the wall during this pandemic, and they're still stealing for the bloody public purse. Because they're obligated to keep buying this stuff for another 5 years. Wow. This dodgy PPE. Mental. Anyway, but Poverty Pie is a bloody hypocrite, as you know. He's called Poverty Pie because he won't pay his workers a decent wage. I wonder if over the last 10 years of the living wage scheme here in Scotland, if he'd have paid his workers a living wage, would that be worth more than 1,200 quid? But more importantly, the hypocrisy of the man standing talking about cost of living crisis when he won't pay his own workers a decent pay, and tap of what the Tories are doing to them. Wow, so much for socialist man of the people. How the hell did these millionaires end up at the top of the bloody Labour Party? They're just red bloody Tories. Wow, what a hypocrite. Anyway, after a couple of supplementaries, the yellow Tory stuff shut Alex Cole-Hamilton go together to ask a question. But I'm afraid I can't tell you what it was about, because you know how Davy's got Lib Dem syndrome. Can't hear them, can't see them, totally irrelevant to me. You know, so can't convince any more of my friends to look into what they're saying either, because I seem to drive them round the bend and all, and they end up with Lib Dem syndrome too. So if you want to know what Alex Cole-Hamilton's third question was about, you're going to have to use your search engine, because I don't have a Scooby. Not a Scooby. Right, let's move on to the main event in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers yesterday, where we had the debate and then the waving through of the motion to have Boris Johnson investigated for misleading Parliament and breaking the ministerial code. We all know he did, but Bojo's confident that he can wriggle out of this. And one thing we do know about the Tories is they're absolute experts at parliamentary procedures and standing orders. It's how they've always managed to get away with so much when they're in government. First up was Starmer. And Starmer goes over what he said on Tuesday and then demands that the Tories across the Whitefield grow a backbone and put Bojo out of office. And next up was Blackford. And Blackford blatantly called Bojo a liar in the House of Commons. That's normally not allowed. But yesterday, through the debate, and I watched it all, and to watch First Ministers last night, yesterday throughout the debate, the term liar and calling Bojo a liar was just breezed by the chair. Instead of pulling people up and kicking them out the chamber for it, that was alright. Anyway, Blackford also demands that the Tories grow a backbone and get rid of this muppet. Now, all the way through the debate, Labour, Lib Dems, even the DUP, who were more supportive, Clyde Cymru everybody were saying to the Tories that you're going to get hammered in these elections because of this behaviour and because you're standing by this loony. But, you know, Ed Davy, he got up and said, he can't wriggle out of this one. The UK public won't put up with another own partisan situation here, where you bend the bloody rules to ensure that the outcome that they want happens. Like they bent the rules in the own partisan case. Well, we know what happened to Partisan, he's not even an MP anymore. But, but it wasn't just the opposition that got tore into the Tories. Senior Tory Steve Baker said Bojo's apology was crap. It was just enough contrition to get him out of the headmaster's office, and then he was back to adoration and bombastic carry on in the chamber yesterday. Right? And Baker says he should be long bloody gone. I seen the press this morning, there's reports saying that the vote of no confidence will be held in Bojo right after the May elections. Alright? But, look, so it's waved through, folks, and it will now go forward to the Privilege Committee, which will start the investigation at the end of the police investigation after Sue Gray has issued her report in full. So basically it's been kicked into the long grass. Right? Kicked into the long grass. But just for your information, what is it that the Privilege Committee does? Well, the Privilege Committee is made up of 7 members, 7 MPs, right? 2 Labour, 1 Lib Dem and 4 Tories. Okay. Now the Labour chair's had to stand down because he's already said a piece on what he thinks the script is with Bojo. So there'll need to be another MP replaced. There'll need to be another Labour MP and replace him as chair on the committee. Now, to be fair to this committee, folks, because there is 4 Tories on it and people can think that was Ben, to be fair to this committee does tend to be quite neutral and take a real view. Alright? So, I say, what the committee can then do as punishment is they can suspend somebody from Parliament for a period of time, or they can actually expel them from Parliament and force a by-election. Basically sack an MP. So the Privilege Committee does have a lot of power. So this will go to the Privilege Committee. But, so as I say, it's been booted into the long grass, right? But there is a Davy says here. And the Davy says is Sunak. Sunak also misled the chamber. I've seen it with my own eyes. He was asked the question when he was taking questions on the Treasury, and he was asked directly if he'd attended any parties in Downing Street, and Sunak got up to the dispatch box and said he hadn't attended any parties. Well, it appears the police think differently. So Sunak should be under investigation as well for breaching the ministerial code and misleading the House. Now, a lot of the speech he's doing there yesterday was about the death of democracy if Bojo doesn't go. Because their system doing their works on standing orders and gentlemen agreements and honour, then if Bojo doesn't go, there's no honour left in the system and the whole system breaks down. But we know that because Lord Hennessy, the constitutional expert for the House of Lords, who said that Bojo had thrown the UK into a constitutional crisis and shredded the ministerial code, he's already done a paper on the situation and made it clear you can't have an honour system if there's no honour among thieves. And there is no honour among the thieves and the criminal cabal down there in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers. None. None. Right. So that was that. It's been waved through and kicked into the long grass. Let's move on to the Ukraine, right? Putin orders a let up in the siege of Mariupol. It's also reported that mass graves have been found around the city. Folks, these are going to be reported as atrocities, but I want to tell you something, a truth about war. You can't leave the dead bodies lying about, and you can't nip down the graveyard and dig a hole and put one in at a time. Mass graves is what happens in the event of war. What happens is you get the digger out, it digs a big trench, whether you're the defender or the attacker, then you clear up the bodies, because if you don't, you end up with disease and pestilence. So, mass graves, I'm sorry to report, but being somebody that knows a wee bit about this stuff, mass graves are normal in war. You don't have time to be nice. You have to get up all the bodies together and put them somewhere. And as they're going to decompose anyway, because you won't have the refrigeration if you've no electricity, then you've got to bury them. So when you see some of this stuff coming out about mass graves and things like that, I want you to remember and fix it firmly in your heads. This is a normal. It is a norm of war. You know, war doesn't stop for people to nip down the graveyard or to the church. You can't have dead bodies lying about. It's bad for morale and it leads to sickness and pestilence. So, Putin's ordered the let up on the attacks at the moment, and he's stoked the storming of the Azovstal steel plants where the last of the Ukrainian forces are holed up. Let's face it, they've no food, they've no ammunition, they're going to have to surrender anyway. The other thing Putin's done is he's told them to lock down the city. Just don't let anybody out. And as Putin's got the perimeter of the city covered, the last of the Ukrainian troops there are going to have to surrender. Alright. Now the Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russia's gains in the south and east will only be temporary. Mr. Zelensky could be right. Because tactically it's very easy to take an area. But if the population in the area and city you've taken don't want you there, then it's very, very difficult to hold that territory that you've taken. Because what happens is they go underground and they sabotage everything you try to do until you piss off. And realise that you can't take that territory, they won't give it up. So, that's the situation in Ukraine for you. Right, Zelensky's saying they'll be pushing the Russians back out the east shortly. And if they get the armament they're being promised, then they might. As I say, because it was appear the people of the Donbass and Luhansk regions don't want the Russians there. Because if they did, and it was a liberation as was being claimed by Putin, then they'd have just welcomed them in as a liberating force. So Putin might be making gains, but holding the gains are going to be very, very difficult. Okay, so that's the latest update on what's going on. But the city of Mariupol will fall. But apparently there's bugger all left to it anyway. But it would appear Putin wants the steelworks in one piece. Okay. And meanwhile, in the region of the city of Kiev, the cleaning up of mines and unexploded ordnance from earlier battles commences. This stuff lying about is really dangerous. It's one of the hazards of war. Not nice. Right, anyway, that's the meat and two veggies of the report I've got for you today, folks. We'll nip on to what the papers have got to say now. Okay. Scotland's papers, new Partygate probe and Tory rebellion, alright. The Scotsman has Johnson to face probe into claims he lied to Commons. MPs will decide if PM is in contempt after U-turn sees plan nodded through. Alright. And the Telegraph goes on Johnson buckles over party inquiry. And so he had to, because his MPs were demanding a free vote. Okie dokie. The Metro has calls to turbinate PM. The gig's up, Boris, and it's a picture of Boris with a turban on his head. There in the India. The Times has revitalised Russian can still win war, Western intelligence warns. Listen, if Putin's going to put his mind to it, he has stronger forces and he's got deadlier weapons. He could win a war, of course he could. The other thing in the headlines, you got your SNP bad story in there, and that's auditor calls for greater scrutiny of ferry fiasco, and PM bows to new party inquiry after Tory revolt. Okay, the eye has Tory rebels force officials into official inquiry into Johnson. PM will be investigated for misleading Parliament after Downing Street days of chaos. Right, the Herald has Johnson vows to lead Tories into election despite Partygate probe. That's what he was telling the press yesterday. But I think when some of these MPs see that, the letters will start going in. The Daily Record has Partygate scandal bites Boris at last. Last days of the Raj. And it's a picture of Boris again with he's got a wee spot in the centre of the seat this time. Last days of the Raj, alright. And I'll skip that one out. And the National has Tories fume at use of Nessie for nationalist brainwashing in school. What a load of push. And MPs back Johnson probe PM to be investigated over whether he misled Parliament. Blackford uses easing off the rules to call Tory leader liar. There you go, that's what I'm saying, you got away with it. Now, we're getting to the right-wing loony rags. These are brilliant this morning. That's Scottish Daily Mail. More misery for hard-pressed drivers as a economy is forced into slow lane. Well, you know, that's the Tories that are driving that bloody economy, it's in the slow lane. Anyway, motorists rocked by triple tax whammy. Right? Now, according to the Scottish Daily Mail, the paper calls it anti-driver taxes and says they're planned by SNP town hall chiefs. This is what we're talking about, congestion charging and workplace parking levies. I haven't quite seen what the third one is yet, but it's a lot of bollocks. The councils have it within their power to do these things or no do them. It's no at the behest of the Scottish Government that it's happening, you know. Any council, it's not just SNP councils, they all have it. And the Looney Rag, the Express has new treasure trove of clues in cancer fight. You notice the Mail and the Looney Rag, the Express, they drop anything to Davy, Boris Johnson and Partygate. That's 2 days in a row now, because they don't want to damage their demigod. You know what I mean? Now let's skip back and see what the Stars got for us today. The Stars got, calm down dears. Big baby Trump accuses peers of fake news. Big baby peers accuse Farage of chat stitch up. And big baby Farage accuses peers of betraying Trump. And the headline is, after a picture of the three of them, is babies. And the headline is, War of the Wazarks. So it would appear that the Stars had enough of Partygate and all. Alright. Right, that's what I've got for you today, folks. Okay. Now remember, there are local elections coming up. Campaign hard for whatever party it is you think will serve your community best. But when it comes to the question of Scottish independence, put your partisan politics in your pockets and keep your eyes on the prize. Learn your how you gonies and get out and win hearts and minds. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, what are the how you gonies? That's what the unionists are going to throw at us. You know, how you going to do borders? How you going to do international trade? How you going to do trade with England? How you going to do passports? How you going to do currency? How you going to do central bank? And the answer is, we'll just take the best practice from around the world. After all, there's been 100 new countries created in the last 60 years. And most recently, we had the velvet divorce between the Czech Republic and Slovakia, which used to be Czechoslovakia. It was done very well. It was done under the international conventions. It took 18 months to set up the new country of Slovakia with a central bank, borders, and a currency floating on the international currency exchange. So it can be done peacefully. All the answers are out there. The Scottish people are highly intelligent people, will copy and paste best practice for each of these things from around the world. Okay. Now, support the independent media, support the YouTube channels that are out there, support Broadcasting Scotland, Independence Live, Caledon Media, you know, the usual stuff I tell you about. Now, if they've got the crowdfunders going and you've got a shekel to spare, throw them in, because these independent vloggers and bloggers do some fantastic investigative work. Okie dokie. Now, health messaging. face coverings in closed public spaces, clean hands and surfaces regularly. When it comes to social distancing, use your napper. COVID's no went away no matter what the press want you to believe. And keep testing if you can. Sarah tested this morning before she went back to work. You guys have a smashing weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all again on Monday. Weather's good. Going to take Buster out in the hill. Have a cracking weekend.